Welcome back. I'm Michael Ray. You're listening to Thought-Provoking Talk on Dresser After Dark. Kambiz Mostofizadeh with us. He's an author. He's a California State University graduate, a business executive, and a consultant. And he's had over 20 years of entrepreneurial experience, dedicated time to philanthropic causes. His unique cosmopolitan background that includes love for traveling and discovering new cultural experiences as depicted in this very unique style of writing. Now, his book is the 25 Principles of Martial Arts Strategy Book for Business and Life. The strategy book that uses the core principle of martial arts and adapts them to business and life. And Kambiz, hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, by the way, did I pronounce your name properly?
Yes, you did.
Oh, okay. I wanted to make sure I got that. Okay. Kambiz, let me ask you this. Martial arts. Define what martial arts. What are we dealing with when we talk about that realm, that world?
Martial arts is a system that was created by people who were under oppression historically, and that means everyone. The human race as an evolved people who are under oppression. I guess it started with the first human being who looked at something and said, this is mine, and tried to protect it for himself and his family. Martial arts is the basis of self-defense. I usually say you can't get more political than defending your own body. I myself studied political science, but I believe the most political thing is being able to defend your own body, and martial arts is the system that allows you to defend yourself.
But isn't it also a process? Isn't it also a way of life? Things that you learn in the martial arts, and then you apply them to life, and you apply the principles to business, etc. So it's more than just defense. It's realistically a way of life and a process, a strategy to move you through business and move you through life and get what you want, because I believe it's very intentional. You don't just do something in martial arts. Obviously, everything becomes instinctive after a while, but it's a learned strategy, step by step by step, till you learn the moves and the rhythm and everything else that goes along with it.
Absolutely. Just like in life, there's no way to be able to specifically learn how to act in every situation we come across. But we live on principles. We're guided upon principles that we live on. And the same with martial arts. It has a set of principles, and these martial arts principles are the base from which strategy is created from. So instead of, for example, in any situation, whether it's in business or a relationship, instead of taking a cookie-cutter strategy and applying it, you would take the principles that you've already learned and be able to create a new strategy based on the situation so it'll fit.
And absolutely, and move it through you, move it through. And I think really that's the key, because when you deal with the martial arts, you deal with anything, most of it becomes automatic. And I really believe when you say automatic, is that when you are dealing with business and you are dealing with life, if you have the strategy of life, you don't have to stop and think about it. You automatically move through, you know what to do. Now, let me ask you the principle of formlessness. What are we talking about when we say that word?
Well, when we're talking about the principle of formlessness, is we're talking about not giving off signals or intentions that will give off, that will reveal your hand, so to speak, or give away your advantage of surprise. You want to be able to always possess the advantage of surprise, because that's what helps you. Look at companies. They always talk about competitive advantage. You even have, companies like AT&T who, for example, own the rights to thousands of patents, but they might not even patent a lot of their inventions because they don't want to create opponents. So by revealing your hand, you lose the advantage of surprise, and that's what formlessness is about.
I think Sun Tzu said it many, many, many years ago. If you're strong, let your enemy think you're weak, and if you're weak, let your enemy think you're strong. And in that way, you totally control. I can't tell you how many business situations over the years that I've sat in, and those, before I opened my mouth, those words would stop me or move me forward.
Absolutely. One of the important things is to be able to hide your form, to always retain the advantage, so you deny your opponents the opportunity of being able to assess your strengths and your weaknesses.
Now, the principle of shifting power.
The principle of shifting power says that no one can hold power indefinitely. By attempting to hold power, you end up becoming controlled by power. And it says that resources, besides resource creation, you really don't have creation of power. You have power that's shifted from one hand to another, because power in the end is a zero-sum game. One person wins at the expense of somebody else. So what you're having is you're having power being shifted and transferred, not necessarily power generated unless new resources are being generated.
Okay, let me come up with an example and tell me if I'm close with what you're talking about with shifting power. There's an adage that I've lived by many, many years of my life, and it's this: a good leader knows when to follow, and a good teacher knows when to be a student. I change hats constantly. Isn't that also an example of shifting power?
It is. But let's look at one of the principles, another one of the principles that I wrote about, the 24th principle of apprenticeship, which teaches us that there will always exist, to some extent, a hierarchy in education, and we need that hierarchy because that, to a large extent, creates the stability of the system in which we live in and prosper. But there's no way to really advance without becoming an apprentice of somebody who knows more than you.
Sure, and isn't that about life? You learn so much, and then you meet somebody who knows more, and you become the student, and then you get that, and then you've got it, and you're teaching it, and then all of a sudden you meet somebody who knows more than you, and you become the student again. Isn't that constant?
Absolutely, it is. And let's look at an old case in martial arts, one of the most famous martial arts in the world, an Olympic sport, judo. Jigoro Kano, when he came up with the system of judo, he was an upstart amongst thousands of jiu-jitsu schools in Japan at that time. But at that time, they were going through a modernization period, so they wanted to advance their systems, and judo became the state sanctioned or official system. But he was an upstart, and when he came in, he was maybe 20, 30 years younger than these jiu-jitsu masters who've been practicing for maybe 30, 40 years of their life, and they ended up becoming students of someone who was 30, 40 years younger than they were, which was interesting.
Which tells you that they're wonderful teachers because they know. And I think that's really what it's about. It's you can't know everything, and there are people who can look over your shoulder and see what you don't see. And I think that's really some of the secrets of life. Okay, the principles of alliance.
The principles of alliance says that alliances are constantly shifting, and the reason why they're shifting is because they depend on human desires. Humans, each individual has their own wants and needs, and based on their own wants and needs, they may make temporary alliances so they can benefit, but what I advise is to make alliances with people stronger than yourself, and in doing that, you become stronger and you benefit. But on the flip side, if you end up making an alliance with someone weaker than yourself, that may weaken you, though you still may benefit.
Okay, and a great example of that is if you are, quote unquote, an entrepreneur. There's so many entrepreneurs out there today that is sitting at your home, and you've got a business and you've got your computer on the kitchen table, and that's where you're making money. Now all of a sudden you start to get more orders, you're making more money, you've got to hire people to augment your skills. So you hire people who know more than you do, because that in and of itself has got to be one of the principles of alliance. You hire people that can increase your ability and your impact on the world out there.
Absolutely. And look, it's natural for us as human beings not to want to let go, to want to do everything. And we feel by doing that we're establishing our domain over our belonging. But really we need alliances, and because each individual can bring a strength to the table, and sometimes they can bring a weakness to the table, and that's why alliances have to be viewed with scrutiny before they're developed and taken forward.
Okay, touch on this. Fast loss, quick win.
Fast loss, quick win says that by attempting to win in an unwinnable situation, what you're doing is wasting resources, and by you're not creating any a positive situation for yourself by trying to win an unwinnable situation, it's better to walk away. If you can't get a fast win, it's better to take a quick loss and walk away from that situation and live on to fight another day.
And that's also part of that is learning when to back off, when to retreat.
Absolutely. And that's one of the principles as well, the principle of retreating. A lot of times we view as a retreat as a loss or a lack of courage, or we weren't determined enough, or we didn't execute it properly enough. And it really has nothing to do with that. It's really having the correct combination of factors working together in order to win. And a lot of times you have all the wrong factors working together in order for you to lose, and you can't do anything about it. That's just how the situation is.
Okay. Now, by the way, one other thing, and then I'm going to break this down because I'm looking at this and I can see some interesting things here. Yielding, so critical.
Absolutely. Flexible. You want to be flexible. It's so easy to say, I have to stand my ground and be rigid, and we want to win every battle. And that's natural as human beings. We want to win every situation. But it's very important to be able to yield, and yielding is different than retreating, because yielding, you're doing it in order to gain an advantage. And you're in effect almost using the energy of that force and becoming one with it in order to use it to your advantage. But unless you become one with it, you can't really become flexible enough to be able to make it yours. You have to be able to become one with it to be able to control it.
Okay, so now I'm in a business, and one of the things that I know in business is to keep the business in and of itself formless in a way that if a decision has to be made and it has to recreate the way it's done, it can be done very rapidly. And I also know that in business, if we're concentrating on accounting, and that's not where to go, we have to be able to shift the power to another area of the business to be able to move forward. One of the biggest things in the business that we can have is the alliances, those relationships that we've created, and we have to make sure that they're the best thing we can possibly have. Also, we got to make sure that we don't get somebody to say, hey, you can make a lot of money here because we can fall on our rear end. Fast loss, quick win. And when to back off and move another way. And when you want to negotiate, make sure that you know when to yield to gain. Are we close here?
Absolutely. And just to touch on that, the 14th principle of timing says that you can only advance when the opponent reveals an opening for you to advance. And if there's no gap for you to exploit, you're just going to waste resources.
You know what I think, which would be really good if you could talk to some of the business colleges, the schools, and get some of the principles within those business courses, because when you really come down to it, this is the bare essence of business. This is how a business should be run.
Absolutely. And these principles really are applicable in business, and they're applicable in your personal life and personal relationships as well.
No, absolutely. There's no question about it. What was it, and I want to go backwards now, but what was it that got you involved in this in the first place? What made you think of life the way you've written it?
Well, I studied martial arts pretty much my whole life. Since I was 6 years old, I started practicing Taekwondo, and I went on to practicing karate and boxing and wrestling and jiu-jitsu, and I fell in love with martial arts as a child, and then when I grew in age, I realized that sometimes you get to tone down the creativity a little, but you get to increase your scholarship level and get to really read about the great and vast literature that's out there, especially from Asia. You look at Art of War, you look at Hagakure, you look at the 7 military classics of ancient China. There's really great books out there that share the ancient knowledge and how it existed. But a lot of times it's so long-winded, and it's almost like a riddle, and it's not broken down as easy as it's explained in a book like The 25 Principles of Martial Arts, which is pretty straightforward, and almost each line is a important sentence that contains wisdom of the ages, and that's what's important. It's direct and straightforward and concise.
No, I hear you loud and clear. And most people today, and when I say this respectfully to everybody. If there's an area that you're going to get into and you don't know everything you need to know about that area, you need somebody, quote unquote, looking over your shoulder, bringing the invisible up to the table, or symbolically holding your hand and getting you through it until you've mastered it yourself. By the way, I think the principles are great. Let me ask you this. Is there a website we can find you at and buy the book?
Absolutely. You can buy the book on
Catherine is with us.
Amazon.com. And you can buy it in two ways. If you're an Amazon Kindle user, or if you're not, you can get the Amazon Kindle app as well. For the next 3 months, I will be providing for Kindle users who are also Amazon Prime members, they can read the 25 Principles of Martial Arts without paying anything. And if they're interested, they can purchase it. And if they would like to purchase the print version, it's $8.88 on Amazon.com.
Wonderful. Hey, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Take care. Good night.